Do you know how hard it is to find a job in this industry and to find talent? It's not easy because places like LinkedIn and Indeed, they're just too general. No one's ever had an industry vertical job board like we have for the investment management industry. Across all job titles, that is Dakota Talent. Of course, we're focused on sales, marketing, distribution, but if you want a job as an analyst at a private credit firm, private equity, you can post a job here. If you want an internship, if you want a job first year out of college, you can all post here. You can even create premier listings within Dakota Talent. So we just wanted to welcome you. As you probably know, if this is your first time to Dakota, we're a fundraising organization. We've been raising money since 2006. We've raised over $25 billion. We know the industry. We've also created an industry-leading database of over 1,000 firms and 4,000 fundraisers that use our data to do cold outreach. So we've created this really wonderful community, and we're bringing the community together to be matchmakers, to bring job seekers, opportunities, as well as employers who want talent. So please use the job board. It's really fantastic. It's easy to use. It's very easy to post a job, post a premier listing, and also to create a profile for yourself and post a resume. So have fun, enjoy Dakota Talent. What is up, everybody? Gui Costin, founder, CEO of Dakota, and I wanted to talk to you about a new Rainmaker podcast, and it's going to be interviewing heads of sales, heads of distribution, asking them all sorts of questions around how they run their sales organization, really digging into their sales processes, how they've set it up, philosophically, how they've literally built the business. So you can hear, as a salesperson, our audience can hear how the best people in the business are running their sales organization. So if you have an interest in being interviewed, or if you want to recommend someone at your company to be on the show, simply email me at guy@dakotalive.com. And if you just want to register on our website where you can sign up to get alerts when we release the newest episodes, simply go to dakota.com and we'll send you emails every time we release a new interview. What's up, everybody? It's Gui Costin, founder and CEO of Dakota. Welcome to Rainmaker Live. I'm joined by my colleague, Tim Dolan. Tim, welcome.
Thank you.
Now, for those of you who are this is a first time show, we break down, this whole show's about helping investment salespeople have process, have structure for how they should go about their day-to-day. Our firm, Dakota, we've been a fundraising firm since 2006. I've been raising capital since 1997. We've raised over $25 billion we have 9 salespeople. And Tim, you know, the whole point of the show, Tim joined the company in 2011, so obviously has been a long time colleague, has adhered to our Rainmaker sales training and sales program. And we do this show because we believe at the end of the day, sales process and doing just a few key things right can make basic exponential differences. This is no get rich quick, there's no shortcuts, there's no silver bullet type stuff that we cover on the show. But today we're going to break down the 4 core elements, the 4 core principles of the Dakota Way, which is our selling system. It's encapsulated in our Rainmaker sales training. And before we kick it off, so we have a great pedigree of raising capital. We're out in the marketplace every single day. We get how hard the job is, right, Tim? And I think that's one of the, sort of from a compassionate standpoint, raising capital is a very, very hard job. There are very long sales cycles. It's extremely competitive. However, there is a method to the madness in our belief. And if you follow the process, you are going to end up having success. And before we get into it, Tim, one thing I just want you, if you don't mind, sharing a little bit, because we are in the fundraising business. That's what this is targeted. If you're watching today, hopefully you are a fundraiser, and I'm assuming that you are. And hopefully we're going to impart some knowledge around sales process. Talk to us about the current fundraising environment, Tim.
Yeah.
What are you seeing?
Absolutely. And obviously you're going to hear throughout the show a lot of the key comments, and one of the themes is doing more with less, right? And a lot of our conversations on the fundraising side is, we hear it all the time. It's such a difficult fundraising environment. I kind of joke, right? Like, when was it ever easy?
Yeah.
I would love to know when that time was and go back there. But I think for this show and what we're seeing in the market, right, is this, that stick-to-itiveness, that process, and importantly is people are taking meetings, right? It's the fun part of getting back in the conference room, the boardroom, kind of suit and tie vibe,
Yeah.
right, which is cool. Still
We're seeing
some coffee,
allocations.
seeing allocations. There's definitely money in motion. We're seeing wins on our long only equity side, on the private side for sure. It might maybe slow down here heading into year end, which is fine, but we're in front of these allocators right now for the 2025 allocation. So very busy, good activity heading into the winter, which is great, and it's across all channels, which is exciting.
Great. So we're gonna kick into our 4 core principles. Now, I always like to think of this as a circle. I'm going to outline first the 4 sections. So first off, setting expectations is core principle number 1 with your PM, boss, CEO. We'll talk about that as creation of a sales plan. Number 2 is attacking your TAM. We call it knowing who to call on. 3 is becoming a master messenger. So now you're in the boardroom, you're in the conference room, you're facing off with the due diligence analyst. What do you say? And then 4, you need a killer follow-up system. How do I utilize a CRM to 10x my leverage? So Tim, those are the 4 core Dakota sales principles. And so Tim, let's start off with setting expectations. So we call it being the dog, not the tail. And we know what it's like, right? Talk about, just so the audience kind of understands, how we see expectations of CEO, CIO, PM up here of what should be raised, let's say on an annual basis versus reality.
Yeah, absolutely. So this core principle 1, again, it's a circle, it all comes back around, but this is creating alignment with your colleagues and your team internally, right? Because no different than an investment process for the product that you're selling, this one is likened to a sales process, right? So part of that is a business plan written out and a sales plan written out on where you're going to be focused your time and energy, right? And most importantly is you have to have buy-in from the portfolio managers, from C-suite, from your colleagues, that there is perfect alignment on the business plan and sales plan of where you're going to be spending your time and energy. And once you get that buy-in, right, then it gets into the next principles and execution mode. But this is all about creating alignment.
And then reporting.
We report to our partners on a third-party basis, our partners weekly, right? So they never question what is Dakota doing. We would recommend as a salesperson, you never want your colleagues to question like, hey, what's Tim been up to? I haven't heard from him the past few weeks, right? It's always getting in front of them, your activity and your pipeline and feedback from the market so then they can make decisions as well. So we report weekly on activity and what's upcoming, what's taking place in the past.
The reason there's 25% turnover in the sales role is because there's not an agreement on setting expectations and then reporting against the plan. Those 2 things, writing a plan, setting expectations, getting agreement on the plan, and then reporting progress against the plan. I got a phone call about a month ago from a good friend. A good friend said, hey, we're having trouble after X amount of months, meaning past 1 year. This person hasn't raised any money. So I said, well, what's been going on in your weekly sales check-ins for progress against their plan? He goes, we don't do that. I said, but I sent you the Rainmaker training. I said, that's the most important thing to protect a salesperson, is making sure they're reporting to the PM, CEO, what have you. You write the plan, you report weekly on your progress against the plan. It puts you in a straitjacket, it boxes you in, it forces you to produce results because you have to present every week and you can't show up with nothing to talk about every week. So we're not here to micromanage or the PM micromanage. This is for the benefit of the salesperson. If you're going to be in sales, you want to be held accountable for activity against your target market. Thus the sales plan. So just to recap, at the end of the day, we're going to send out documentation on this in the show notes. Writing a sales plan, the channels that you're going to cover, exactly what success looks like, getting agreement from your boss on that, and then having a clear, regularly scheduled meeting to report progress against the plan creates career longevity. I can't emphasize this enough because no one's going to fire you if every single week you're showing up with progress against your plan, and then they're seeing exactly what the feedback is from the marketplace. Where you get into trouble is if you wait a year and you don't do that, and then you haven't put up any numbers. And the reason you haven't put up any numbers is probably because you haven't been accountable.
Exactly.
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Perfect.
Good. So that's core principle number 1. And as you can see, our compassion and love for the sales role, the fundraiser role, knows no bounds. We wouldn't be here talking about this if we didn't want to try to help all of our colleagues have massive, massive success and blow right through that 18-month mark, which is where a lot of people get choked up, so they can get into years 2, 3, 4, and 5 to be collecting commissions, build those quarterly revenue streams. That's our goal. So Tim, core principle number 2, know who to call on, which is establishing your target market, your total addressable market, and then a process and a procedure for attacking that market. Tim, you want to talk about that? So we need to establish the right fit channel for you're going to be calling on. That's number 1. And then number 2, what's the process for attacking those accounts?
Yeah, so there's 2 topics within this core principle. Number 1 is creating that TAM, right? So depending on your investment strategy, we always talk about product structure drives channel coverage or channel focus. Right. So if you are on the long only side, think mutual fund, separate account, ETF, who are the buyers of those most likely? RIAs.
The biggest consumers of that product structure.
Yeah, exactly. Would be the RIA, the family office, bank, broker, dealer, and in some instances, the consultant channel, right? So that's your TAM. If you're on the private side, maybe a longer lockup type vehicle, right? More institutional with some family offices and select RIAs that can allocate there.
So one thing that I want to drive a stake in the middle of this conversation is make sure that when you're establishing where you're going to focus your time and energy, what channels, that you've been able to, and we'll diagnose it for you right now, but make sure you're being very smart about discretionary assets and time to make decisions, okay? Not every channel is created equally between foundations and endowments, public pension funds, consultants, REAs, multifamily offices, one and the same, family offices, banks, broker-dealer, okay? They're not always created equally. There's not always that sense of urgency to allocate capital. So we're a little segue here in terms of establishing your target market. What makes the RIA channel so attractive to any investment firm?
Discretion.
Yes.
The ability to move early, quick, fast.
Yes, they have discretion to allocate capital. They don't have a lot of bureaucracy around approvals. They have investment committees, but bank, broker-dealer might still a really, really good channel, might investment process consultants, extremely, extremely slow, right? It's not a criticism, it's just they move very slowly, especially on the long only side. There's just not a lot of search activity in that arena. And they like their incumbents. Once they establish who they like and they have their bench, they're going to stick with them. How many, misnomer at the family office, great channel, but a lot of family offices aren't allocating a lot of capital annually, right? So there's time, there's like capital allocation, how much money you put into work each year. Banks and broker dealers, great news there. Those firms are growing like a weed, right? So they bring in new investors all the time. Their financial advisors are bringing in new investors. They need additional investment options. Things close, opportunities create. So those would be, so when you look at it, make public pension funds tied to consultants a little slower, go with the incumbents, need to go with larger providers on the private equity and private credit side because they have a lot of capital to put to work. So make sure you're thinking through the dynamics of the channels that you're selling to from a time perspective, right?
Absolutely.
Tim?
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
And so, and pick that. That's why very rarely do I hear people say, man, I want to sell to RIAs because, right? They just say, I want to sell to RIAs. They never break it down, right? We talk about discretion, which is time, but also those firms are growing, right? They're entrepreneurial, they're growing. Banks and broker dealers are growing. The financial advisors are growing. So those financial advisor teams want to grow. They want to make more money. They bring in new clients. They grow. They need to allocate capital. The platforms need to have more places to allocate that capital. Being in front of those are very, very important. So we spend a little bit more time today than we normally do breaking down in the dynamics of those channels. But if we were to slice this little segment out, I think there's a lot of gold to be had there, because you do have to break down the why each channel is attractive and how quickly and rapidly can they allocate capital. And because it does come down to how much capital you're putting out each year.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the next part.
Let's talk about,
Yeah, the next part, which is it gets into pure execution. You've defined your TAM. You have your set of buyers that you're really calling on, right? And in some instances, especially the RAs, right? Let's say there's 4,000 that custody at Schwab, Fidelity, and Pershing, and you're just only focused on those. That's a large number, right? So how do you on a day-to-day basis, we always talk about wake up in the morning and have purpose. What is your purpose? Covering those channels we call city scheduling, right? And what this is effectively is going after a certain channel or a set of buyers and breaking them down by the metro area where they sit, right? And there's largely New York, Dallas, Boston, LA, Chicago, right? There's the big ones and growing.
Now, let's be fair. This is the exact point in time where this conversation just got ridiculously boring and painful, okay?
What's that?
This topic.
Why is that?
Because now we're talking the most pedestrian part of the fundraising job. This, at the end of the day, for most people stinks. It really is not any fun. However, Tim, what you just went through, okay? Success in fundraising comes down to really one core thing: number of meetings against qualified buyers. That's the deal. The more qualified buyers you get in front of, if you have a good product, you're going to have more success. You add a PM into those meetings, then you accelerate that. Those are the two things that matter most. Those are the only things that matter. In order to get those results, you have to pick cities and schedule. Like, we have a database that we've created called Dakota Marketplace. It's a cold lead database. We have over 1,100 investment firms as subscribers, 5,000 fundraisers. There's no thinking required, meaning research anything, admin work. You simply go into the database, you pick Boston, going to Boston for a day, who should I call on? We have that information. But like I said, no fun. This is where it gets boring, a lot of rejection, a lot of frustration, the whole thing. However, if you consistently send your 20 to 25 meeting requests a day to the 5 cities that you have on the calendar, that's where you get success. Because the reason I wanted to bring up the fact that this stinks is I'm calling it as it is. But it's the gate that you have to go through to have success fundraising. You need to be booking meetings with qualified buyers every single day.
I mean, we are only as good as our ability to get meetings. If we can't get meetings, then the next 2 principles don't even matter.
In order to get meetings, you have to ask.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the third component of the know who to call on, our core principle number 2. Tim, close it out with the email.
Yeah. So the email, I mean,
email's everything.
It's got to be. I mean, we always joke it's you live and die by the subject line, right?
Yeah.
A very clear subject line.
Because you need to get the email opened.
Exactly.
With 200 other emails coming in that day to that due diligence analyst, trying to get in front of them. The good news is, and I love you all, is that most people do not write the right email, and so it gets ignored. We're gonna go through what we believe you can do to not have that email get ignored.
So let's say, for instance, our one manager, Edgewood, large cap growth, we're going to Dallas. So your subject line, our subject line is Edgewood large cap growth, meeting request, December 5th, 11 a.m. So now the analyst knows, all right, it's U.S. large cap growth. They're reaching out for a meeting. They're going to be in town on December 5th.
It's a subject line meeting request.
Meeting request.
Right. What does that make you do? If you're a human being, your brain should go, what do they want to meet about?
Yeah. And then getting into the email, and we have this as a follow-up, but the body of the email, 2 to 3 sentences max, straight to the point, who you are.
I'd say 1 to 2. I like 1 to 2.
Who you are, what you do, right? Very clear, but the most important.
Make it very compelling to communicate clearly who you are and what you do. Because if you say meeting request, the person's brain goes, what do they want to meet about? And if you're going to do 5 paragraphs or not be clear or say stuff that's not relevant to who you, like why they should take the meeting, you only should use words that contribute to why someone would want to say, yes, I'd like to meet with you. I always say the famous JP Morgan private bank line. If you received an email from a private banker at JP Morgan because your great aunt died at 109 years old, leaving you $1 million, and the banker wanted to meet with you to discuss how they're going to get you the money, do you think you'd respond to that email?
Yeah.
So how do you construct, or how do we all construct an email that communicates information that sounds so compelling? Like, are you going to be in Boston? I'd love to meet about what you guys do.
Yeah, exactly.
And so there is some serious art. There's also some serious science to creating this email, because it's the only thing you have to try to get the meeting.
Yeah.
And then how do you close it out?
The closing it out is a very clear call to action. Can you meet at 11 a.m. on December 5th, right? Stress this enough. Clear call to action. It cannot be, let me know if you're free on the 5th while we're in town.
Or let me know, most people say, let me know if you're free
In the next
anytime
couple of weeks.
in the next year.
That's
I mean, being that open-ended gets you nowhere. And by the way, what people don't really know is you're just insulting, you're insulting your potential prospect. You're truly insulting them.
It is.
You're truly saying, you do the work for me. Yeah. You go on your calendar and you figure out the deal, not me.
Once you put this into action and you start getting emails from other people saying, hey, I'd love to connect. Let me know if you're free. You notice it and you're like, God, that's actually pretty annoying.
It's insulting.
Yeah.
You want me to do all your work for you?
Yeah.
So have a clear call to action. Can you meet December 5th at 11 a.m.? Boom. And you can attach an attachment, do some other stuff that can get caught in spam. So it just, if they've already approved your email and you're kind of go through the firewall, you can do those types of things. But so back to core principle number 2, know who to call on. So you have to establish a total addressable market, the channels you're focusing on, and make sure you ask that you really understand what channels can move money and not. What are your most appropriate channels for your product structure? You need to focus on city scheduling. Always have 5 cities on the calendar, knowing it stinks. Just telling you right up front, it's a pedestrian part of fundraising, but it's required. Reps versus qualified buyers drives fundraising success. The more reps against qualified buyers, the more you're going to win. And the email must say, subject line, meeting request, date and time, 1 to 2 sentences on who you are, what you do. Clear call to action. Can you meet December 5th at 11 o'clock? So that wraps up core principle number 2. Now, core principle number 3 is you've done all that work. You booked all your meetings in Cincinnati and you're there. You have a great slate of meetings. Boom. You don't know how to tell your story. And so all those meetings, the person's like, man, I really like Gui. Boy, you're a nice guy and everything, but I have no idea what he was just speaking about. Why? Because investment strategies are complex.
Yeah.
And we can make them more complex, or we can work really, really hard on the front end to simplify them. And we're going to give you the 4 attributes of a meeting, the 4 segments of a meeting that you need to be able to nail.
Yeah.
You want to kick it off, Tim? Number 1, how to open up the meeting? Outside of the niceties.
The niceties, and don't talk about weather because it doesn't matter. But the first thing you need to do is center the conversation. Why are we sitting across from each other? What are we here to talk about? And this should be no more than 30 to 45 seconds.
Yeah, if you think about the first minute or 2.
Yeah, and it is.
Take all the knowns, the knowables off the table.
Yeah, Edgewood Management, we were founded in 1974. We are solely focused on a 22 stock U.S. large cap growth portfolio, managed $38 billion across a number of vehicles, mutual funds, separate account, and UCITS. 100% employee owned by 11 partners, 6 of which are the portfolio managers making all investment decisions. All right, I went through that quickly, but a lot of those are facts, just key facts that you could read about on your own, but it just centers the conversation. So now the buyer, the analyst is, all right, U.S. large cap growth, $38 billion, been doing it a long time, a team of 6. All right, let me ask about that. Let me ask about the team. And then you start getting
They know what they should be, they know what they're listening for now.
Yeah.
Right, now they're very clear on what they're listening for. By just saying that type of stuff, it clearly shows longevity. It shows a lot of AUM, which is good, a long-term track record, a very large team. They're focused on one strategy. They know what they should be listening for. It centers the conversation. Now, we are going to throw in 2 what I think are the somewhat genius things that you need to be doing. So the second thing that you need to get on the table as fast as you can before you get into your story is you have to ask how they go about making investment decisions. You have to get a sense of their investment decision-making process. They talk about it all the time. They operate in that world all the time. Before you get into the nitty-gritty of the investment strategy, you can go right in, but if you don't understand how they think and how they make decisions, it's going to make the conversation not quite as relevant and a little more difficult for you. get into and ask them those questions right up front. What do you mind if I just ask you, how do you go about making investment decisions? What is your investment process? Because they're going to get into probably portfolio construction, asset allocation, and they're going to walk you through their thinking. And every firm has a slightly different way of thinking about, right, how they make investment decisions.
And these qualifying questions, right, while you might ask, can you go through your investment process or your allocation decisions, right? They may share some information that you can then take for your pitch, right? Your story. Maybe they say, hey, we've been largely passive, we're moving to active, and we don't have a manager right now, right? Or they could also say, we've been active, we've used X, Y, and Z manager, we're a little unhappy here, right? They share some information. It's like, all right, I'm going to bottle that in, and now I can cater my comments throughout the meeting accordingly. So those qualifying questions on the front end are crucial.
And you also get respect from the buyer, because if they're like, man, why would Guy not ask me how we make decisions? He's here to talk about investment strategy, right? So immediately then there's a respect where now someone, you know that you're playing the game at a high level.
Well, it's the quickest way you can create a partnership with that person on the other side of the table, the better, right? When you start asking and you care, right? You genuinely care about their business.
It's not a transaction.
Right? It's not a transaction.
You're building a relationship.
Exactly.
And you're trying to understand how they think, right? Because then you can cater your comments to how they think. Third, which is the easy part, which is, it's not quite easy because you need to get into a Q&A, a conversation back and forth. Because they're going to say, okay, Guy, Tim, roll tide, let's go, start. Then you go through investment philosophy and process, portfolio construction, risk controls, team, how you generate ideas, right? You're going to go through all of that. But you want to make it Q&A. You don't want to go into a long monologue. You don't want your PM to go into a long monologue. And if they do, you need to somehow elbow them or disrupt them in some way and get them back on track. So the Q&A is really, really important. Then, no one's ever going to tell you this, I guarantee it. You need to close out the meeting with the follow-up in the meeting. I get so many questions. Guy, what's your follow-up cadence after the meeting? What do I always say, Tim?
It happens in the meeting, and you should know coming out of the meeting.
Yeah, the follow-up happens in the meeting. Yeah. And what I mean by that is you have a respect to yourself, I believe, and to the person across the table that you've just spent an hour with. You've worked really hard to get the meeting. Now and then you've done all the work to inform them and educate them on who you are, what you do, your investment strategy, your understanding how they think, investment process. You have to ask the two toughest questions. One, so tell me, would you mind if I just asked, do you see our strategy fitting within your asset allocation model? And that can be a public strategy, public stocks, it can be fixed income, loans, private equity, what have you. And if they say, actually, yours, it's too niche-y, or no, I don't for these reasons, okay, you know what your follow-up is, mailing list. If they say yes, if it's a public equity strategy, then you can say, do you anticipate doing a search in the next 12 months? Because that's typically how the investment process works. They'll do a search for large cap growth or small cap value, whatever it might be. And then if they say, yes, we do, and then you say, would we be able to participate? Hopefully they say yes. Then you know what the follow-up is around what resource do we need to marshal to help educate you better on our investment strategy. If they say no, mailing list. If it's a private strategy and you say that, then you simply say, hey, do you think you can make our final close or our next close on 3/31/2025? If they say no, that's 3 board meetings, we won't be able to make it. Now you go back to the office and now you're reporting progress against your plan. You've asked those questions. You can give your boss very clear updates. You will never have to say, great meeting. How was the meeting? You can tell them exactly what happened in the meeting, what you learned, and then, hey, this is appropriate for them. They will be doing a search or they won't be. However, they have a large allocation to large cap growth, but right now they're happy with the manager that they have. But we're now in front of them. We're on their bench if they're going to potentially do a search. So that is becoming a master messenger. Those are the core elements of how to, what we believe is run a really solid meeting. Now, to close on this, Tim, we always talk about the sand. We gave you the rocks and the pebbles in the jar. You have to put in your own personal things, if you will, which that's up to you to sprinkle in your own sand. We're not saying you have to, but we're giving you the 4 core components of how to be a master messenger.
Exactly.
Good?
Yep.
All right, to close out, core principle number 4. This is the 10x leverage part of the story. And if you think about what we're about to go through in terms of creating a killer follow-up system, it's not follow-up in terms of a PDF attachment to an email thanking them for a meeting. This is about tracking information and 10xing the leverage that you get. And I always like to say, Tim, this is really falls into the urgent, right, but not necessarily important, okay? Because you can get away with not having a CRM. Now, it's not going to be in your best interest, but you can get away with it. It's not a burning building. But if you do it, right, if you do it, it can have exponential results in your career. And so, Tim, why don't we talk about the most important thing? First, selecting a CRM. You need to use a CRM. Let's not recommend any, but you got to select one. And then what's the proper thing that you first need to do to get into that CRM to 10x your productivity?
Well, there's a number of things, right? It's getting your activity, your past activity and future activity, your meetings in the CRM,
Meetings
all your
you've
calls,
scheduled.
everything you scheduled. So then when you get out of the meeting, you can put your notes in there, right, and run past activity reports. Again, going back to principle number 1 and reporting your progress, having the CRM is a click of a button. You can run those past activity reports.
So let's just hone in on that for 1 second. CRM, if you schedule a meeting, get it into the CRM, okay, with the proper fields, which is very, very simple, between date, who, account, name of the contact, all of that. Let's even just have a little fun and say, I hate meeting notes. Fine. Don't put your meeting notes in. That's your call. That's just gonna create more value and spice up your database. But table stakes are getting the meeting scheduled that you've scheduled into the CRM. Let's just quickly go to why. So why would you have to do that, Tim? And what is the true value to a salesperson of just simply that one activity of getting the meetings that you have scheduled into your CRM?
So you can run past activity reports in the future and it creates sales triggers.
Right. So it creates sales triggers and sales actions. You're able to see where you've been. You're able to see who you've met with over the past 30, 60, 90, 180 days, over the past year. We always say, Tim, about time.
Time flies.
Time flies, right? Before you know it, it's going to be 6 months. And you want it, and it's going to, as you are able to run a report of all of the past meetings that you've completed. So you get in scheduled, then obviously you complete it because it hits that date. Then it becomes a completed meeting and you can review all of that. And then it's going to trigger, oh, you know, I have to follow up with this person. Oh yeah, you know what? It's been a little while. I've talked to that, right? You can see where all of your footsteps have been in the past, which is critical to efficiency of then being able to rapidly follow up, touch base, get information. Hey, I meant to call this person. Hey, I'm going to be in Boston. Gosh. Because if you do 10, 20, 50, 90, 100, 200 meetings, your brain can't track all that. And using a yellow pad or an Excel spreadsheet is just a far inferior way of managing all that data.
Exactly. And then getting your activity, your meetings and calls entered into Salesforce. You come out of the meeting, right? And that is where you then create what will become the pipeline. So creating opportunities against the activity that you just completed. So there's different stages within the pipeline and we can share those stages, but it's ranking them, right, from the most near to close to maybe might take a little bit longer.
Because every time you create an opportunity, you're going to put in the opportunity stage, the stage of the opportunity, and it's a sales cycle. Generally, there's about 7 sales cycles from, we like to think of it as the top sales cycle would be a current client, right, a client. Next would be finals. There's decision making. That's a key barometer. Red zone, right, they're in that evaluation stage. It's close to getting to investment committee. Due diligence is where you want to have the biggest, where you've done a PM meeting and now they're diligencing your strategy. The others below that, of course, would be prospecting, qualified, or long-term evaluation. You've met with a firm, you created the opportunity, they did some due diligence, they say not right now, It's not dead, but it's long-term evaluation. And then you're able to create those reports with, at the top, finals, red zone, due diligence.
Yeah.
And you're reviewing those, then you can quickly print those or show those on a screen when you're doing your weekly updates with your PM.
And importantly is having the contact at that firm that's tied to the opportunity right there. And the crucial fields within the opportunity are the notes and the next steps, right? So where do you stand in the opportunity and what are the clear next steps?
So current status,
Yep.
text box, current status, text box, next step, text box. Always have to be filled out.
Yep.
Because then you're able to look at your screen and then that's how you manage your business. Those two things, past activity and your pipeline.
Yep.
Now we can, in the detailed notes, we get into, you can create consultant pipelines, you can create broker-dealer, bank broker-dealer pipelines, because those are static accounts, making sure that you're somewhere in a sales cycle with all of those. And then, but your broader pipeline is the most important one. Now, if you're just covering a particular channel, that's what it'll be focused on. Only create opportunities where there's really something there. Creating opportunities just on every single meeting that you do isn't a great idea, because if you do the meeting, everything works out great, but there's just no opportunity and you got to take the quick no. Having that opportunity, you want to deal with that in the third and closing component of this. So past activity, getting the meeting scheduled, that's 1. 2, pipeline reports. 3, the golden field.
Yep.
So as we close out, to really maximize and be able to quickly see how you're penetrating your market, you want to create a drop-down menu. It's the name of the product. So for us, Edgewood Management, we have a drop-down menu, 7 sales cycles at the account screen, where, for instance, let's say my job is to cover Boston. There's 126 RAs in our database in Boston. I should be able to go into our Salesforce and see our penetration rate against Boston. I should be able to see exactly what sales cycles are what, so I can see in Boston who I should focus on. Because if I know half of them I've already met with and they're in a sales cycle, but the other half still are in the prospecting phase, then I know there's roughly 50 plus RAs that I need to be doing outreach to try to get in and set up a meeting with. And so it allows you to focus and manage your penetration against channels and a lot of other stuff if you put that golden field at the account screen. So account screen, drop-down menu, name of the product, and the values of that drop-down menu are sales cycles.
Exactly.
So, Tim, to recap, so number 1, core principle number 1 is setting expectations with a sales plan and a weekly meeting to report progress against the sales plan. 2 is establishing your TAM and know who to call on, and then using city scheduling and the proper email to book meetings with your qualified buyers. 3 is becoming a master messenger, opening up the meeting, getting all the core information off the table, then asking about their investment decision-making process, then getting into a Q&A, then closing out with the 2 toughest questions. Then lastly, core principle number 4 is having a killer follow-up system where you're going to get your meetings scheduled into the database so you can run past activity reports, which then lead to the creation of pipelines to manage your pipeline and your reporting up to your boss. And then lastly, you're going to create the golden field on the account screen so you can manage your penetration rates very quickly. And so it allows you to focus who you should be calling on. And that is our Dakota Way sales system. It's our Rainmaker sales training. Tim, any closing comments?
All good. Thank you.
All right. Thanks everybody for joining another episode of Rainmaker Live. Thanks, and we can't wait to see you on the next episode of Rainmaker Live. Hello everyone, thank you for joining Rainmaker Live. Hopefully you enjoyed the content. As you know, we have a whole program that's dedicated to training both salespeople and sales leaders, okay? How to lead teams and how to follow the principles that we have followed to raise over $25 billion. If you have an interest in bringing me in to meet with your team and go through the Rainmaker curriculum, I would love to do it. Simply email me at gui@dakota.com.